crazy week, as Triple H said, according to the WWE, the most successful WrestleMania of all time. We all know the results. We all know who won the matches.
Yeah.
Cody Rhodes, it wasn't really anything of a surprise, specifically after what we saw on night number one. But, Brandon, I want to kind of talk to you about this real quick, about WrestleMania, another WrestleMania in the books, another pay-per-view in general, where it's the most successful pay-per-view of all time. But the problem I guess I have with this, with Triple H and him coming out at every single event and saying that this is the most successful, they've sold more merchandise. Now, as a fan of sports, I enjoy when attendance records are broken. I feel like I'm a part of that. I feel like that's something that means something to me. I feel like that's something that is important to the fans. But I guess my question is, this would be like if the Super Bowl ended and the current commissioner for the NFL, I can't think of Roger Goodell, right? The commissioner, he came out and he didn't say that we broke any records attendance wise or anything like that. But he said, hey, we made more money tonight than we've ever made before. A lot of people would say, that's kind of smug, right? Like, what do you mean you made more money? Yeah, we made more money. We found a way to make more Fanatics jerseys cheaper than ever, and so we can make more money on the jerseys. And yeah, for sure, the stadium was sold out. But we've had bigger crowds here at the stadium before. But what made this different is we made more money. Well, you make more money because things cost more money. So listen, I understand that everyone gets excited as a wrestling fan and was people retweeting and reposting.
Here's the thing. I have to stop you there for a second. I understand obviously like inflation and all that stuff and cost of goods, this, that, and the other thing. But I would say just if you put the raw numbers together, like Cody Rhodes, for example, there's reports out here that his merch sales, I'm not talking about dollars and cents. Huh? I'm talking about just sales, like the number of items that were purchased are historically high. And that's just across the board. Yes, they've made more money because money is, we were talking about this on previous episodes where a cost to go into any shows now are getting more and more expensive. I get that part of it, but just on the number of particular items that have been sold, it's absolutely insane. And I will have to say this too. I think WWE is in a great era, the Triple H or the Paul Levesque era, so to speak. And I have to ask you this because I know we talked about it last week where you're big into the whole set designs and things like that. That's not really my cup of tea. So I have to ask you, with the way the attendance have been lately, the WWE is going through this new model where we're going to see less of a display, so to speak. It's keeping very simplistic so they can fill up the arenas more and more. What are your thoughts on that part of it? I have to ask.
Listen, that when Triple H said he wants to feature more of the fan, I agree. And we've talked about pay-per-views from the 90s where they were at the Fleet Center in Boston or were at Greensboro Coliseum, and they broke these attendance records of like 22, 23,000, similar to what we saw this past week on SmackDown and Raw with 20,000 people in an arena. I can't remember the last time an arena show, maybe WrestleMania 20 back at the Garden, had that kind of crowd because of the fact that they normally have these sets. It's just not even possible anymore. The Molson Center can hold like 22,000 people, but they're not drawing that because of the sets. I do like it when the reason they're shrinking the sets is to fit more people in and is to showcase more people. And believe me, watching WrestleMania, part of the appeal, part of the allure is that drone shot of all the people in the crowd. So that is essentially a part of the presentation for sure. So if the set's smaller because there's more people there and you're showing those people off, absolutely, I'm not against that whatsoever one bit. I will say though, when Triple H was talking about making more money, right? The fireworks, right, at this event, I was there and I've been to many WrestleManias. I want to say they were lesser than events in the past, right? So I'm fine with him making more money. I'm fine with the company making more money. But I want to go to an event that feels to me from a presentation perspective like this is the biggest, and it was a very big WrestleMania. It felt very big, and there was a lot of things that I can definitely say they made this bigger than once in the past. But going back to like just even SoFi Stadium last year, I know The Rock wasn't involved, so that didn't help in the presentation, but SoFi Stadium, don't get it twisted. Paul Levesque, we all remember when they went to the post press conference last year, who was talking? Money in the Bank, who was talking? It's been Triple H, even though obviously Vince had been there this whole time.
Sure.
Triple H was still the face of the WWE for like the last 2 years or so. And I think the set last year at WrestleMania was a bigger set. And like I said, I've seen the AT&T Stadium a couple years earlier where they had the fireworks off, real fireworks, like we saw at Elimination Chamber, not just some pyro off of the stage, but I'm talking like a blimp shot of the city where you can see fireworks over the skyline, like we saw at Elimination Chamber in Australia. So, I don't care necessarily that we maybe were missing a firework here, or missing a firework there, or something like that. But when you're touting that, hey, we made more money than ever before, a part of me has to think, is it also because you're smart at business? And that's great. I mean, that's your job. Your job in the WWE is to, like we saw in MLB currently in Major League Baseball, right? How do we make the jerseys cheaper, sell them for the same price, larger profit margin, right? That's fine. But I guess don't necessarily, when you're bragging about this stuff, when you're putting it all out there, when Michael Cole is literally talking about revenue and how much money they made and the largest gate in Raw history and the largest gate in SmackDown history and all this stuff, tell me how that equates back to the fans. What is it that we get out of WrestleMania being the most successful financial WrestleMania of all time?
You just said it. You're a part of something special, which you're and yes, it's tongue in cheek, I guess, too, because you're responsible for all the money that WWE and Endeavor and everybody's making. I get that, but you're a part of something great because, from my perspective, like when they announced like the super attendance that they had at Raw this past week, for example, and then the 3-day total, or the 2-day total of WrestleMania night 1 and 2, like all those gross numbers, like being a part of something that cool, like, for me, I wasn't in attendance for any of these shows like you were, but to me it feels like whenever, like when I go to a Syracuse basketball game and it's like, all right, we're going to have the biggest on-campus record. It's like, to me, like that's cool to be a part of that.
I agree. The attendance thing is great because that feels like something you're a part of. I guess when it comes to like, this wasn't like the largest attended Raw ever. I think they had a Raw back in the 90s in the Sky Dome, right? So they've had Raws in like the Georgia Dome, the Sky Dome, stuff like that. This wasn't the largest attended. This was the most money.
You know what it is, though, right? You know what it is. It's them touting, not only, I mean, yes, touting the financials and this and that, but it's also flexing their muscle to the Tony Khans and the AEW of the world, which I know we're going to talk about that in a bit. But it's them flexing their muscle, saying our product is hot and people are watching or consuming it in some way, shape, or form, whether it's television, social media, in person, you name it. They're consuming it at levels that are not seen by a lot of sports organizations these days, and entertainment as a whole.
No, I mean, I will say the attendance thing, and I did the math myself, which is crazy. And I've talked about this last week when I went on the radio. That was my final point, which I thought was just awesome for a wrestling fan, was the fact that WrestleMania has the potential to bring more money into your city than the NCAA Final Four. And to a mainstream sports fan, that's absurd, right? Because I come back from WrestleMania and people go, I don't even know what that is. Was there a lot of people there? Why did it have to be in Philadelphia? Couldn't it be in Syracuse? I told somebody recently in Syracuse, I said, WrestleMania couldn't come here. And they said, why not? And I said, because the dome's not big enough. And they looked at me with eyes like, what do you mean the Carrier Dome or the JMA Dome now is not big enough? Because they can't they weren't watching WrestleMania, right? So they're like, what do you mean it's not big enough? That would be too big in my eyes from what I know about wrestling, right? So the fact that I could tout, that kind of thing of revenue-wise, Los Angeles brought more money in than the Final Four that year. But also the fact, the point I was getting at was, I did the math here. The women's NCAA Final Four, which, yes, I understand these were very watched items, so I'm not going to dispute that. But attendance-wise, because WWE touted a 5-day attendance in Philadelphia with SmackDown, NXT, Raw, and 2 days of WrestleMania. Attendance-wise, there was more people for all of WrestleMania weekend than there was for the men's and women's Final Four combined. And I think that's crazy, as the women's Final Four was in Cleveland with 2 sold-out crowds, and then obviously 2 big crowds, I think, in Arizona for the men's Final Four. So that's just crazy to think. I mean, they were probably pretty close in numbers, but the fact that more people attended WWE events in Philadelphia this weekend than the men's and women's. And the women's has never been hotter.
WWE's a juggernaut, and like people like, and there's there's going to be people out there that I don't expect everybody to be a fan of the business, but don't spit on the fans that are that support it. Like, oh, like don't play dumb. It's mainstream. The Rock goes on all these different on these different shows. The Cody Rhodes was on Today's Show this past week. Like all these different things. Like you're gonna get exposed to it in one way, shape, or form. Like even if it's like, oh, John Cena, he was in, even if it's like newer fans, like John Cena's in movies. Someone says, oh, he's a wrestling fan. He was a wrestler. Prior to that. And you can't play dumb. Like to me, like it's so mainstream that like I feel like people sometimes they look at wrestling fans a little differently than like the NFL fans or the MLB and NBA fans. But at the end of the day, the WWE is a worldwide brand. And it's one of the biggest brands in all of sports and entertainment. So sometimes I just look at people like, okay, you don't have to like it, but you can respect it.
One thing that I'll say when it comes to financially that I can appreciate as a fan, I guess, because I can tie it into how that helps as a fan, is sponsorships, right? All of those matches, every single one of them was sponsored. And how I equate that as a fan is obviously more sponsorship means more of those companies believing in WWE, more of those companies putting the WWE out there, right? So it's becoming, I guess, more acceptable, right, to be a WWE fan, right? If everybody, like you just said, knows who John Cena is, knows who The Rock is, they're going to know who Bianca Belair is, they're going to know who Roman Reigns are because they're going to be in commercials, right? I mean, right here on the YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see I got the WrestleMania Prime bottle.
Of course you
Brandon,
did.
Brandon, I'm going to ask you this question. So this was a not for sale item, right? This was only at WrestleMania item that was given away, right? It is currently still closed. Now, if you had this item, they gave it to you at WrestleMania as a part of the show. I'm not against Prime. I'm not against drinking it. I'm not saying I would. It's my favorite drink in the world. I don't really know what this tastes like. Would you preserve just the bottle and give this drink a try, or would you just keep it closed, keep it in the fridge for all of eternity?
I personally would just drink it because, I like hydration, and I've always wanted to taste what the Prime bottle looks like, or taste what it like, what like each. Let me ask you this: what flavor is it?
It doesn't say, and that's the curiosity as well.
That's why you gotta open it and drink it, dude. Like you gotta see what the flavor is. And I'm not gonna lie to you. Like I get that they were in Philadelphia, so for me, I would never keep a Philadelphia Eagle collector item in my household. So I would have already consumed that drink.
Well, there's no Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, it's got the Philadelphia
Eagles. It's got the
Eagles
colors
color.
of Philadelphia Eagles, man. Come on.
But I mean, that was the color for everything WrestleMania. I don't know if you're watching on the YouTube video. I did get something a little bit different. My WrestleMania hat that's located behind me that I have on display. I actually got the Sixers, Philadelphia, the pink and blue Phillies 76ers font of the WrestleMania hat instead of the
it's not
green.
the Eagles. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not an Eagles fan as well. I will say though, I mean, because you're obviously the bigger NFL fan.
Yeah.
I'm a Giants fan. I don't like the Eagles. I think they're up there as one of my most hated sports teams. I think the New York Yankees I dislike first most, and the Philadelphia Eagles I probably dislike second most in all of sports.
Yeah.
And I have to say that I really disassociated the two. I wasn't thinking of the Eagles when I was there. I wasn't thinking of any of that kind of stuff. I do have to say, though, like while I was in there, I did make a comment of, this is strange because any other time, and I'm not against going because I'm that kind of person, but any other time I'd be in this arena, any other time I've wanted to be in that arena, being the Lincoln Financial Field, I don't think the camaraderie would be there as I was experiencing.
Dude, you can't wear Giants gear or Cowboys gear in Philadelphia and not expect.
I would, but I mean, yes. I guess my thing is we wouldn't all be there. Like WrestleMania, it was very communal, and that's why I go to WrestleMania every year because at that point we're all friends. I'm talking to strangers. I'm shaking hands. I'm having a great time with everyone.
Dude, let me ask you this: like I saw on social media, and again, I wasn't there, and you can only take certain things with social media with a grain of salt, obviously. Like some people were commenting saying that the Philadelphia fans were kind of like the people in the stadium. It wasn't a hot crowd for a lot of the show. Is that a true statement, or would you disagree with that from different people?
I would say WrestleMania. I rarely. I mean, when you have specific moments, the crowd gets really hot, right? When you have specific things. So on night number one, there weren't a lot of specific things that got the crowd as hot as night number two. But specifically, I think a lot of people were talking about, I don't want to say it's 100% the weather, but a lot of people were claiming on the weather. I did notice that night number 2 was a lot louder, was a lot hotter. But at night number 2, I mean, you had a world championship title change hands. You had the universal title championship change hands. So I will say night number 1, it was pretty hot for people like R-Truth and Awesome Truth winning the tag belts.
Yeah.
A great way that they did that there, having the heels win the first tag belts, but keep the match going, to have the faces finish it off. So with that match, there was a lot of buzz, and with Sami Zayn beating Gunther, there was a lot of buzz there. Obviously, the fans didn't necessarily go home happy with the Bloodline winning the main event. So yeah, I think the coldness, I will say, when I left night number 1, and this isn't very typical, I'm at WrestleMania, it's a Saturday night, you're going to have to kick me out of there. Night number 2, they essentially kicked me out of there. The ushers were going, all right, the party's over. Because like we talk about wrestling fans, your wrestling fans, these people, they don't know that they're ushering the Super Bowl. They just know that they're ushering an event, and you need to get the hell out of there because they want to go home. Yeah. So night number 2, they kicked me out. But night number 1, no one got essentially kicked out quick because it was so cold that when that bell hit, people were out of there. They weren't picking up collectible souvenirs on the ground. They weren't picking up confetti from anything. They weren't looking around for extra free programs or water bottles or Prime bottles or any of that stuff. They were just getting out of there and getting home because it was very cold, probably the coldest. I've been to the 2 other outdoor WrestleManias in the north, colder than those 2, I'm going to say. But then night number 2 was perfect, and the crowd was hot. One thing, and I mentioned on one of the videos that I posted, that really kind of irked me. Night number 1, I was worried. I worry. I've had this issue a lot with the WWE with their light situation. They love to shine these lights in certain spots that are just blinding. It reminds me of back in the day when I went to my first WWF show and I tried taking photos with the disposable camera, and none of them came out because the lights are just crazy and wild and are not conducive to taking a photo unless you're literally up next to the guy. So same today, right? Lights are like, these have these storm lights that kind of just blind you in certain spaces. Night number 1 was perfect. They had the storm lights, part of the entrances, but as soon as the bell rang, all the lights dimmed. The crowd got dark. I thought that was kind of cool too. Looks very like a soccer crowd because we're all just 70,000 sitting in the dark, instead of just being well lit up. Great. So we see the matches just fine. No complaints. Night number 2, early on in the night, they had the stormlight things going the whole time. And I don't know if you could hear it on television, but the stadium as a whole, all the way around, was chanting, turn the light off. They were doing like the soccer chants. Oh, please turn the light off. Like, oh.
We did hear that. We did hear that audibly listening to it at home. We did.
Oh, please turn the light off. Oh, please turn fuck this light. Fuck. I mean, it was just like tons of chants. Yeah. And the craziest part is they turned the light off right when LA Knight went down for the pin on AJ Styles. So if you heard this eruption, I was like hoping they turned the light off early, because that way that tells the people in the back what's going on. So if they turn the light off and they heard this eruption, then the people in the back go, yeah, that light was bad. I can hear it. Like, they're not making that noise in the middle of a dead match for nothing. But they did it at the end of the LA Knight match. So they did it, but maybe did it on accident and didn't necessarily get the message, because all of a sudden LA Knight goes down for the pin and it's like 1, and as soon as it hits 1, the light goes off and the crowd went as if Cody Rhodes just won at the main event. I mean, the crowd went crazy, but it was because they turned off the light, not because of the pin. And I was like, they're never necessarily gonna know, like that we were going so crazy about this light. Luckily, by the later on in the night, the light kind of came on sporadically, but they found ways to turn it off. I don't know what the purpose of this light is. They clearly went night 1 without it, so they could go night 2 without it. That would be like a question. If I had Triple H's phone number on speed dial, I would just be like, hey, I don't care about the stage set, whatever it is, but just, can we do something when it comes to like obstructions, not just a light, but obstructions in general. And I would say the biggest negative of having an outdoor WWE event in general is just, these obstructions. And I do wonder, I would love to talk to somebody in production. Do you go sit in all the seats when you're putting up that structure, when you're putting up the stage? Do you go sit in those seats and look at it and go, nope, no, this ain't going to work. Nope, this ain't going to work. Or do they just do it and then whatever?
Dude, you know what I heard too? They were selling seats. I saw it online where it was behind the stage. Yes. It was like where the lights were and you couldn't see, and it was like, instead of like the tickets did say obstructed view, you literally couldn't see anything. It was just the lights, how the lights move around. It was like, that's all you're staring at. So you're just there, but you're not there. You're not even seeing the show. Like, it was weird.
Yeah, they did that, and that's kind of why I believe the set. So I'll give WWE some credit. I believe the set was a little bit lower than we've seen. WrestleMania 39, they had that huge set. If somebody fell off the top of that set, they were dropping 30, 40 feet off of that set. I mean, that thing was tall when they at SoFi Stadium. Wasn't nearly that tall this year. To be honest with you, it was raised off the ground, no higher than an old Monday Night Raw set, right? And that's in a big stadium like this. But I think part of that was because they had the seats behind the set. So right above where it said WrestleMania, that whole section of seats was being sold. So they
Let me
filled
ask you
that in.
this. So I want to ask you though for night one, what was your moment of that night? I'll get to mine in a second. I want to hear yours.
Well, I will say, as somebody who went to Scranton, Pennsylvania last year, and his girlfriend who's really big into certain kinds of music, seeing Motionless in White, because I've seen them obviously in they're from Scranton, Pennsylvania. So seeing them kind of local to their home, knowing how much that would mean to Rhea Ripley, I know that she's had New Year's Day and some other bands that I've seen as well come out. But Motionless in White is like the inspiration for her look. So like that was literally like if Limp Bizkit's playing The Undertaker to the ring.
Yeah.
This isn't like a cover band, or this is the band who sings that song. So I like that moment there. But night number one, I gotta say it's Sami Zayn beating Gunther. That was probably the most big night. I also not necessarily moment, but the Rock's entrance I thought was pretty historic at night number one. That's my night number one takeaways.
I mean, I'll say this. I mean, obviously, watching it from from my house versus in the in the stands, I enjoyed the whole segment, backstage where Sami Zayn's getting ready for that big match against Gunther, and he's with his wife Khadijah, I think Khadijah, right? I believe Khadijah is his wife, and he's got his son there, Junior, Rami Junior there, and they're having that moment backstage where before he goes to Gorilla and get everything situated. I just thought that was cool because for me, me being a parent, having little kids, that's like I thought that was cool, moment with his wife, and then as he's getting ready to go out, like he's in Gorilla, Kevin Owens comes over, pumps him up, and then he goes out, and then the match happens. Great match, by the way. Sami Zayn, like I was so happy for him, and you know what? It's gonna be fun to watch him, be the next Intercontinental Champion because Gunther had 666 days, which when people were talking about that was an interesting number, 666 for his reign. But kudos to Gunther for a hell of a reign, and Sami Zayn, I'm looking forward to his next title match, which is actually coming up next week against Chad Gable. The only thing I don't like about that is Chad Gable, is not winning that match because Chad Gable. Why would they give Chad Gable the title right after Sami just ended the streak? I do think Sami Zayn's going to have this title for a while. So the downside to this whole thing is Chad Gable's not going to get the title. But going back to WrestleMania itself, Gunther, Sami Zayn, they tore the house down. Favorite match of the night.
I will say one thing that I've kind of said in years past, and listen, I understand the price of things. I understand how it is, right? But WrestleMania is WrestleMania, and if you grew up watching WrestleMania, you grew up watching it as one event. So I'm going to continue to watch it for the rest of my life as one event. I'm not going to watch it like baseball or Monday Night Raw where I kind of tune in for a couple innings here and tune in for a couple innings there. And what really solidified that, I think, more than a lot of years was this year's WrestleMania, where Triple H even said in the press conference that night number one was just an undercard, just a setup for night number two. So, you feel kind of bad for somebody who attended night number one of WrestleMania, who's telling everyone I went to WrestleMania, and Triple H is saying, you went to the road to WrestleMania, essentially. You went to the table setter for WrestleMania. Like I said, I understand it's very expensive. But you really, if you're going to WrestleMania, especially if you're someone who's traveling, if you're kind of a casual fan, it is what it is. But if you're someone who's traveling to it, you got to go to both nights. It's one single event. And what really I think I took away from that is night number one had some matches that I could have give or taked. I think that 6-woman tag match was the shortest match of the weekend. I think it went like 8 minutes long. And then the Rey Mysterio tag match with Dominic Mysterio, had that moment with the Philadelphia Eagles players, but again, kind of a give or take. Night number two, I don't think it had that. That 6-man tag was actually way better, or the 6-man street fight way better than the Rey Mysterio match the night before because of the
100%.
Bubba Ray Dudley being involved, Snoop Dogg being involved, having those different elements of the
Dude,
match.
you know the only reason why that 6-woman tag match was on the card was for Jade Cargill. Let's be honest. That's what
Yeah,
it was for.
but I mean, just having the night number one had two matches that I don't think felt like WrestleMania, but night number two had no throwaway matches. If I want to take
Oh,
anything off of night number two,
night
so
number two was great. Like trying to pick pick my favorite matches, like from a match perspective. Like obviously you got to go with Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns. There's so many stories there, but there's other great matches on here. Like I enjoyed Bayley and Io Sky. I thought, I also thought that, obviously the opening match with Seth Rollins and Drew McIntyre. Obviously Drew wins the match. He's the champion for like 2 minutes, and then CM Punk and him get into it. And then the Money in the Bank cash in come, from Damian Priest. Like that was a cool moment. So I liked it because they kicked off the night with a great match and a great moment where the Money in the Bank, was cashed in. Damian Priest takes the belt, and then at the end of the night, Cody Rhodes gets to finish his story. But not only that, we got to see some great appearances from the likes of John Cena, from the Undertaker. Like it was to me it was a great moment, and I just thought I thought night two was, from start to finish, just a hell of a show.
only two Money in the Bank cash-ins ever at WrestleMania, and Seth Rollins has been involved in both of them, right? And he won one of them, and then he was involved as the person who beat him was then beaten seconds later in the second one. So I would say night number two, my favorite, I think we had a few good entrances. I will say Io Sky, if you want to talk about dead crowd. Io Sky, I don't know if it's just her entrance or music, but I mean silence when she came out, because it's like it's not a song you can sing along to. It's not anything you can chant with. It was just people didn't know what to do with themselves. They don't hate her, but they're not super fans of her that they're willing to scream at the top of their lungs for her. So kind of silence when she came out. My favorite entrance of the entire weekend, I gotta say, is Seth Rollins. I know didn't have the craziness that maybe like a big rock band or anything like that, but when I talk about Seth Rollins' entrance, that is the attention to detail that WWE sometimes lacks, right? WWE could have said, let's have a bunch of guys dressed in these crazy outfits and go beside you, similar to the Rosebuds with Adam Rose back in the day. But they could have said, let's do 5 guys. Let's do 10 guys. That's a lot of guys. And the way we'll film the camera angles, it'll look like a lot of guys. We see with CGI nowadays making crowds look bigger by just duplicating them over and over again. But they said, no, we got to make this so when you have that shot of the ring and they're around the ring, it literally is a C. Like you won't be able to differentiate. It's like I don't know if you played PlayStation games back in the day with sports games where the crowd back when they just developed 3-dimensional crowds and they weren't people yet. They were just like looking like confetti, and they were just like all these colors just kind of that looks like a full crowd. We just put all these colors together for like PlayStation 1 games back before we could differentiate and have individual faces. But like they had like 45 people, maybe even more, and the outfits they were all wearing were all intricate. Nobody's outfits were like you're not really going to be getting TV much, so let's not put a lot into your outfit. I mean, like I said, so many guys, and they all went to the ring, and it was just the attention to detail to say, hey, let's have like 50 guys. Like when you're down there, I don't want it to just be this camera angle makes it look like it is full of these people around the ring. I want you to, if you were standing down there, suffocate. Like that's how many guys we had crammed in there, and it really provided like an awesome image.
That was a cool entrance. I will give you that. But I have to say the best entrance of the weekend. You already mentioned it. The Rock's entrance, night one with the Brahma Bowl fire, like just like the special effects, the music. Like for me, like that was the best entrance of the weekend, which I'm not surprised because you're gonna give The Rock the best. You're gonna spend the most money on The Rock at this point. He's on the board, like we get that. And he just got, from what I read, he got a very nice bonus check. I think like $4 million. So The Rock's had a great stretch, which I'm not surprised by that because The Rock is box office. He looked pretty good in the ring on night one. He looked pretty good in night two. In the main event, he sold the choke slam well. I think he did a great job with that. But yeah, I think WrestleMania, to put a bow on it as a whole, because I know we're not going to go match by match here. As a whole, I thought it was one of the best WrestleManias of all time.
I mean, that's like the new feeling you have, right? So I'm not saying it was a bad WrestleMania. It was a good WrestleMania. I had a great
Was
time the
it?
whole time I was
Okay, so
there.
what was better? What was better, 38, 39, or 40?
It's difficult to judge them right now against each other, because they're just so new. I will
40's the
say,
best, dude. Like Cody finished the story, man. And we've talked about it in the beginning where all these records are being broken, attendance, this and that. The product has never been any hotter in 25 years. Let's just be honest. Like the product hasn't been that much hot in that amount of time. So for me, like right now, at this point in time, with everything that's happened, like everything's popping off. WrestleMania 40, not only is it ushering a new era, but this has been the best WrestleMania in recent memory for me personally.
I will finish off this talk quickly with the Hall of Fame on Friday night. I was there, and I just want to get your opinion on what do you make of Paul Heyman being the first inductee at the Hall of Fame? And as somebody who was there, I can tell you, and if you watched on TV, it's not, they didn't do any camera tricks. The crowd left. I mean, you talk about large crowds. First off, the Hall of Fame, I stayed all the way to the end. And I actually even left like right before the end, like right as they were like wrapping up, where I could tell they were wrapping up. 1 a.m. 1
Yeah.
a.m. I'm
Yeah.
leaving this arena, right? That's crazy, right? 1 a.m. I'm leaving this arena. They essentially, because they started around 10:30, but you had Paul Heyman, and I don't know if they knew that they were going late, so they're like, hey, let's just go out with the bang here, and then like people are going to leave because this is going to go on way too long. Or what the reason behind having Paul Heyman come out first? But like I said, 1 a.m. It wasn't just 1 a.m. and we all left. I mean, when I left, it was like leaving an event. It was like leaving a minor league baseball game, like that's went to 12 innings. Like
Yeah.
everyone's kind of trickling out little by little. Like as each new inductee comes out, more people are like, all right, or even in the middle of speeches. So it's crazy because The Rock is out there talking, and we talk about how he's box office and all these crowds. When The Rock was out there talking in the quote unquote main event of this Hall of Fame, there's like 4,000 people left out of
Dude,
20,000.
here's the thing. Here's what I'll say. I'll quick note on that. I just think the placement of it, I get like, it ended really late. I didn't watch it live, obviously. I watched it the next morning. But for me, like Paul Heyman should have finished the show because let's be honest, like, and just to show the respect to the other Hall of Famers, the Hall of Fame inductees from this year, like we all know they were there for Paul Heyman, but like let's give these Hall of Famers a really good crowd. So why don't we save the main event, the main course, so to speak, for last? And you know what? That's what they should have done. So in hindsight, I don't like what they did, to be honest.
I will say in previous years, they've had less Hall of Famers. So the idea was they're going to do it after SmackDown. They're going to get it out of the way quick. I think LA just had 4 people. So it was like 90 minutes or 2 hours. The Undertaker one was probably 2 hours, which seemed long after a SmackDown, but you were out of there by midnight or whatever it was, at that time. So nothing too crazy. But this year, I think they didn't have a ton of Hall of Famers, but all of them talked. They didn't really have anybody, inducted, other than like Muhammad Ali, and like The Rock came out and The Undertaker came out. So there was talking with everybody that was inducted, and that Thunderbolt Patterson went on for 20 minutes when I didn't even know the guy was still alive. So we went from, is this guy just going to get inducted by somebody talking on his behalf, or boom, he had one of the longest speeches. So I think what this really shows you is no matter how many people you have, whether it's a small number and you think you can sneak in after SmackDown, they've got to do a different format with this. And believe me, I understand. It's good that you got Paul Heyman out of the way, because if you ever do move this to Friday Night SmackDown, that speech could never be on any television. I don't even know if Netflix would want it. But
It was
I will,
awesome.
yeah. But I will say you got to come up with like a different format where this is kind of its own thing. I get it. WWE wants to make more money. They want to put in an arena. They were having trouble selling out arenas, based on the Hall of Fame by themselves. That's why they have SmackDown included. But it's just way too much.
You know what they should do?
In there and shoehorned in there.
You know what you do? You make it an event. So you make the first half of SmackDown like original, like a real SmackDown, and then you cut down the amount of inductees, because I feel like if you're putting so many in every year, I feel like it's going to water it down eventually. That's
kind
of
run down, yeah.
So for me, you do the first hour of like a normal SmackDown, you get your stuff in, and then the second hour, just to keep things nice and tight, that's where you do like, okay, you have two inductions. So you have like a Paul Heyman and then like the US Express, for example, and that's it. You do it for 2 hours, you're getting it on TV. The only downside is Paul Heyman's going to be like beeped out the entire time or muted out the entire time because his speech is not safe for television. But the point is, you do half a show for SmackDown, half a show for the Hall of Fame. You get people in and out. Do it like a normal night where you're doing like a main event before, so like a main event taping. So you have essentially 2.5, 3 hours. You're in and out. You're done. That's what I
do
would
like a special edition 3-hour SmackDown, but
Maybe.
just have the Andre the Giant Battle Royal kick off the show, and then the rest of it's a Hall of Fame.
I'm okay.
Like,
Yeah.